I packed my entire life into 42 cardboard boxes while my son sat in the next room complaining about the quality of his cell phone reception. He did not ask why the house was becoming empty, or where the smell of bubble wrap was coming from. It took a single photograph of my new high-rise kitchen on the internet for my children to realize I was not just a piece of furniture they could leave behind. Before I go any further, let me say something honest. If this opening hit you in any way, subscribe to Voices of Emily so you stay here with me for the rest of this story. I am putting a part of myself into these words, and I want you to walk through it with me. And when you can, leave a comment telling me what this moment reminded you of. Your voice matters here. Then tap the like button so this story reaches someone who might need it more than we know. I moved 3 states away, earned a promotion to senior director, and received a 70% increase in my salary, and not one person in my bloodline noticed I was gone. Not my son, Terrence, and certainly not my daughter, Keisha. I did not even receive a simple text message asking where I had disappeared to. It was as if I had never existed in their world until my sister, Bernice, posted a photo of my new skyline view on her social media page. Then my telephone began to vibrate so hard it nearly fell off the granite counter. Terrence sent me a message that read, "Mama, could you sell that place? Chantel needs $200,000 for her new beauty clinic. We are family, and we need you." $200,000 after months of silence and years of being treated like a ghost in my own hallways. But let me tell you how I arrived at this moment. This story did not begin with that entitled text. It began much earlier, in a kitchen in Savannah that no longer felt like it belonged to me. It began much earlier, in a kitchen in Savannah that no longer felt like it belonged to me. I should have been accustomed to the feeling of being invisible by now. I was standing at the stove, slowly stirring a pot of collard greens and smoked turkey that nobody had requested I make. In the living room, my son Terrence was pacing back and forth, talking on his mobile phone as if I were merely a shadow on the wall. His voice was booming and full of an excitement he never seemed to share with me. He was describing a luxury vacation to the Caribbean that he and his wife, Chantel, were planning. He mentioned a hotel that cost $600 for a single night. I heard him clearly. $600. And yet, it had been 4 months since he had promised to repay the $300 I loaned him to fix the radiator in his truck. Do you know what it feels like to realize your child views your kindness as a debt that never needs to be settled? I turned off the burner with a slow, deliberate twist. I dried my hands on the same floral apron I had worn for 12 years, the one with a stubborn grease stain from a Sunday dinner 3 winters ago. I walked into the living room and stood there, hoping for a glance or a nod. Terrence did not even look up. He kept laughing and telling Chantel that they would definitely get the room with the private pool this time. I reached out and touched his shoulder with a mother's gentleness. He frowned at me as if I were a common solicitor interrupting a private business meeting. He held up a flat palm to silence me, a gesture one might use to quiet a barking dog in the street. I backed away into the shadows of the hallway. One might use to quiet a barking dog in the street. I backed away into the shadows of the hallway. I went back to the kitchen and began to put the food away. I poured the greens into a glass bowl and sealed it tight. I knew deep in my soul that no one would eat them, but I did it because that was the rhythm of my life. I cooked, I cleaned, and I existed in the narrow margins of their busy lives. 2 days after that, my daughter Keisha arrived at my front door without a single warning. She had my 2 grandchildren, Jalen and Maya, with her. They did not say hello. They simply ran past me to turn the television to the highest volume possible. Keisha walked in behind them, her eyes glued to her screen, and did not even offer me a smile. "Mama, I need you to keep these 2 today. I have a meeting with a new client, and my regular help fell through," she said. It was not a request. It was a command issued to a servant. I had a doctor's appointment scheduled for that afternoon. A checkup for my high blood pressure that I had already postponed 3 times because someone always needed something from me. But Keisha was already halfway out the door, waving a hand over her shoulder without looking back to see if I was okay. "I will send you some money for a pizza," she shouted from the driveway. She never sent a single cent. I spent that long afternoon watching animated movies and making sandwiches that the children barely nibbled on because they wanted fast food. I had to call the medical clinic and cancel my appointment once again. The woman on the other end of the line sighed with a heavy disappointment that made me feel like an irresponsible child. "I am so sorry," I whispered into the phone. "I am truly sorry." Keisha did not return until 9 o'clock that evening. She smelled like expensive French perfume and carried a shopping bag from a boutique, where a single blouse cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The children were already fast asleep on my sofa. She woke them up with a hurried, impatient voice, never once thanking me or asking if I had managed to eat. She simply said she had to rush home because she had a fitness class at dawn. I closed the heavy oak door behind her and stood in the silent hallway, looking at the photographs on the walls. They were pictures of my children's graduations, their weddings, their milestones. I realized in that quiet moment that there was not a single photograph of me doing something I loved. Everything in that house smelled like a slow, tired exhaustion. I could not find sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with the lights extinguished, wondering when the last time was that someone had asked me how I was feeling. Not a casual greeting while they checked their email, but a real question, where they looked me in the eyes and waited for the truth. I could not remember such a moment. The following morning, Terrence showed up again, but this time he brought Chantel with him. "We need to have a serious talk, Mama," he said. Something in the sharp edge of his voice made my spirit go on high alert. We sat at the old oak kitchen table, the same place where I had helped him with his spelling words and served thousands of plates of food over the decades. Chantel was wearing a smile that looked like it had been painted on with a very thin brush. It was the kind of smile people use when they are preparing to take something from you. "Mama," Terrence began, "we know you have been diligent with your savings over the years. We have an incredible business opportunity. Chantel wants to open a high-end med spa, and we just need a small contribution to get the doors open." The word contribution felt like a heavy stone falling into a deep well. I asked him how much they were looking for. $60,000, he replied without blinking. I felt the very floor beneath my feet begin to tilt. $60,000 was nearly the entirety of my life savings. It was the money I had tucked away penny by penny, working extra shifts at the accounting firm, and denying myself a new coat or a weekend trip for 20 years. "Terrence, I do not have that kind of money to give away," I said, and my voice felt as thin as paper. He and Chantel exchanged a look that was cold and calculated. "Mama, we know what is in your accounts. This is an investment in your family's future. We would pay you back once the profits start rolling in next year." I knew in my heart that next year would never arrive. I shook my head slowly, feeling a new kind of clarity rising up within me. It was not a feeling of anger, but a realization that I was the only person who was going to protect my future. "I cannot do it, Terrence. I am sorry." He stood up so quickly his chair screeched against the linoleum. "It is always the same with you," he shouted. "You never want to see us succeed. You just want to sit on your money while we struggle to build something." Chantel took his arm with that fake, pitying smile, and they walked out of my house without a word of goodbye. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the empty rooms like a gunshot. I sat there in the silence, staring at my cold cup of coffee. That was the moment I knew I could no longer live this way. I did not have a plan yet, but I knew I was finished with being a doormat. 3 weeks later, the telephone rang on a Tuesday morning while I was dusting the baseboards. It was an unknown number from the corporate office in Chicago. "Mrs. Robinson, This is Harrison Vance from Human Resources. We would like you to come to the headquarters tomorrow morning. We have something important to discuss regarding your tenure with the firm." My heart began to race. I had worked at that same firm for 28 years, sitting in the same gray cubicle, and looking out the same window at the dumpster in the alleyway. I was 67 years old, and I was certain they were finally going to let me go. I arrived at the headquarters the next morning with palms so damp I had to wipe them on my skirt before I entered the elevator. The building was a tower of glass and steel that made me feel very small and very old. Mr. Vance met me with a wide, genuine smile that I did not know how to read. "Hattie Mae, we have been reviewing the efficiency of our regional branches, and your department has the highest accuracy rating in the company. We are opening a new executive office in the city, and we want you to lead it as the senior director of operations." I was so stunned I could not find my breath. Director? Senior leadership? The position comes with a 70% salary increase and a full relocation package, he continued. We need someone with your wisdom and your loyalty. Will you take the position? I left that office feeling as if I were floating on a summer breeze. For the first time in my entire adult life, someone had actually seen the value of my work. Someone had recognized that I was more than just a background character. I went home and immediately tried to call Terrence to share the news. He did not pick up the phone. I sent him a text message telling him I had something wonderful to share. He replied 4 hours later with 3 words. "Busy now, Mama." I called Keisha, and she actually answered, but I could hear the loud clinking of silverware and laughter in the background. "Mama, I am at a dinner party. Is this an emergency?" she asked with an annoyed tone. I told her I was moving for a promotion. "Oh, that is nice for you. I have to go, the appetizers are here. Call me next week." She hung up before I could even tell her which city I was moving to. I sat on my sofa and looked at the walls I had painted with my own hands. I looked at the furniture I had bought on layaway, and the photographs of children who did not have 5 minutes to listen to my joy. Not one of them asked when I was leaving. Not one of them asked if I needed help packing the heavy boxes. They did not even ask for my new address. That night, I made a silent vow to myself. I would take this job, and I would not say another word to them about it. If they did not care enough to listen, they did not deserve to know. The next 14 days were a whirlwind of activity that I kept entirely to myself. I signed the new employment contracts, accepted the moving allowance, and spent my evenings searching for an apartment in a city I had only seen on the news. I did it all in a beautiful, sacred silence. Terrence stopped by one afternoon while I was in the back bedroom packing my books into crates. He walked right past the boxes in the hallway as if they were invisible. "Mama, have you changed your mind about that $60,000 for Chantel? The lease on her space is due Friday." I did not look up from the crate. I kept my focus on the spines of my favorite novels. "No, Terence. I told you I do not have that money for you." He let out a loud, frustrated huff and turned around to leave the room. He did not notice that the bookshelves were half empty. He did not notice the rolls of tape on the floor. He only saw his own desires and his own frustration. It is a sad thing when a child becomes so blinded by greed that they cannot see their own mother standing right in front of them. The day the moving truck arrived, a soft rain was falling over the Georgia pines. I had hired a professional crew, 2 young men who treated my old mahogany dresser as if it were made of solid gold. They called me ma'am and offered to carry my purse to the car. I gave them cold lemonade and some homemade cookies I had baked the night before. They thanked me with such genuine warmth that it brought tears to my eyes. It was a strange realization that 2 strangers could show me more respect in an hour than my own children had shown me in a decade. I left my house keys in the landlord's box and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. I spent 11 hours on the highway, watching the landscape change from the mossy oaks of the South to the rolling fields of the Midwest. I had 11 hours of silence to think about the life I was leaving and the woman I was becoming. I arrived in the city just as the sun was setting behind the skyscrapers. The apartment the company had secured for me was on the 24th floor. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a sea of sparkling lights. It was modern and sleek, with white walls and a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. It was mine. It was entirely mine. That first night, I did not even have a bed yet. I slept on a high-quality air mattress in the center of the living room, wrapped in a plush new quilt. I had no curtains and no television, but for the first time in 40 years, I had a peace that did not feel heavy. I had a silence that felt like a long-awaited blessing. I woke up the next morning and felt a lightness in my chest that I had forgotten existed. I started my new position at the executive office on Monday morning. The space was beautiful, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the quiet hum of productivity. My new team greeted me with a level of respect that made me stand a little taller. They sought my counsel on difficult files and listened when I spoke during our morning briefings. There was a man there named Mr. Clarence, a senior analyst who was close to my age. He had kind eyes and wore silver-rimmed glasses that always seemed to be slipping down his nose. If you need help navigating the local transit or finding a good grocery store, please let me know, Hattie Mae, he said. I know how difficult a big move can be. I thanked him and felt a small flutter of gratitude. It was so simple, yet so profound, to have someone acknowledge my humanity. As the weeks turned into months, I began to build a life that was centered around my own happiness. I bought a velvet sofa in a deep shade of blue and a dining table made of reclaimed wood. I filled my balcony with potted herbs and flowers that thrived in the city sun. I drank my coffee every morning while watching the city wake up below me. I did not rush to the stove to cook for people who would not thank me. I did not check my phone every 5 minutes to see if a child needed a favor. I sent a group message to Terrence and Keisha letting them know I had settled into my new home, and that I was doing well. Terrence replied with a single thumbs-up icon. Keisha did not reply at all for 3 days, and when she finally did, she only asked if I had seen her blue sweater in my basement. It did not hurt as much as I expected it to. I was beginning to learn that my value was not tied to how much I could do for them. I was learning that I was allowed to exist for myself. I started going to a local jazz club on Friday nights with Mr. Clarence and a few other colleagues. We would eat spicy gumbo and listen to the saxophone players until the early hours of the morning. I felt young again. I felt vibrant. I felt as if I had finally stepped out of the black and white world and into a life of full color. One Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I was not expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole with a bit of caution. It was my sister, Bernice. She was standing there with a colorful suitcase and a wide grin on her face. "Surprise!" she shouted when I opened the door. We hugged for a long time, and I felt a piece of my heart mend. Bernice had always been the wild one in the family, the one who traveled the world and never let anyone tell her what to do. She was the only person who had truly listened to me over the years. "Hattie Mae, this place is absolutely stunning," she exclaimed as she walked toward the windows. "Look at that view. You are living like a queen up here." We spent the weekend exploring the city together. I took her to my favorite bakery and the Museum of African American History. Bernice took photographs of everything. She took a picture of me laughing over a plate of ribs, and another one of me standing on my balcony with the wind in my hair. "You look like a different woman," she told me. "You look like you are finally breathing." "I am," I admitted. "I truly am." Before she left on Sunday evening, Bernice insisted on taking one last photo of me. I was sitting in my blue velvet chair with a glass of wine in my hand, looking out at the city lights. "People need to see this," she said. "They need to see that it is never too late to start over." I drove her to the airport, and we said our goodbyes with promises to see each other again soon. I went home and felt a deep sense of contentment. I did not know that my world was about to be rocked. Let me pause for just a second. This part of the story is where things start to get heavier, and I want you to stay with me for it. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. It keeps you close while I take you through the rest of this. And if something in this stirred a memory in you, tell me in the comments. After that, press like so this story does not disappear into the feed. That night, my telephone began to ring incessantly. It was as if a dam had broken and a flood of messages was pouring in. Terrence, Keisha, and even Chantel were all trying to reach me at the same time. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Had something happened to the grandchildren? Was there an emergency back home? I opened my messages and saw that Bernice had posted the photos from our weekend on her social media pages. She had tagged me and written a caption that said, "So proud of my big sister Hattie Mae. She moved to the big city, got a massive promotion, and is living her best life in this gorgeous high-rise." The comments were filled with people from our old neighborhood, all of them shocked and impressed by my new surroundings. And of course my children had seen it. Terrence's message was the first one I read. "Mama, why did you tell us you were struggling when you have a place like this? That apartment looks like it costs a fortune. We need to talk right away." Keisha's message followed quickly. "Mama, I cannot believe you moved into a penthouse without telling me. Jalen and Maya would love to visit. Also, we are looking at a new house and could use some help with the closing costs." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. For 3 months, they had not cared if I was alive or dead. They had not asked if I was lonely, or if I was succeeding in my new career. But the moment they saw a photograph of success, I was suddenly the center of their universe again. They did not want to see me. They wanted to see my bank account. I turned off my phone and sat in the dark for a long time. I did not want to be angry, but the disrespect was so heavy I could feel it in my bones. The next morning, I turned my phone back on as I walked into the office. I had 34 missed calls. Chantel had even sent me a long voice memo explaining how her med spa dream was falling apart, and how a woman of my stature should be proud to support a family business. She spoke as if she were doing me a favor by allowing me to give her my money. Mr. Clarence noticed my face during our morning meeting. "Hattie Mae, you look as if you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. Is there anything I can do?" he asked. I took a deep breath and decided to tell him the truth. I told him about the years of being ignored and the sudden interest now that I had something they wanted. I told him about the $200,000 Terrence was demanding and the $30,000 Keisha wanted for her house. Mr. Clarence listened with a solemn expression, cleaning his glasses with a slow, rhythmic motion. When I was finished, he looked at me with a gaze that was both kind and firm. "Hattie Mae, a mother's love is a gift, not a bank loan," he said. "You have spent your entire life pouring into people who have not bothered to even bring you a cup of water when you were thirsty. You do not owe them your peace, and you certainly do not owe them your retirement." I knew he was right, but the old habits of a mother are hard to break. I felt a lingering sense of guilt, as if I were somehow being selfish for keeping what I had earned. But then I remembered the way Terrence had silenced me with his hand, and the way Keisha had walked out of my house without a thank you. I decided that I would not keep running from them. I would face them, but I would do it on my own ground. I sent a message to the family group chat. "I am inviting you all to come to my home this Saturday evening for dinner. We will discuss everything then. I will send the flight information for you." They all agreed within minutes. They were so eager to get their hands on what they thought was mine that they did not even stop to wonder why I was being so generous. The days leading up to Saturday were filled with a strange, quiet resolve. I went to see a lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson who specialized in estate planning. I made some very specific changes to my will and my financial directives. I also made a significant donation to a scholarship fund for young women in my old neighborhood who wanted to study accounting. I felt a sense of power as I signed those papers. I was finally the one in control of my own legacy. I was no longer a spectator in my own life. Saturday evening arrived, and the city was bathed in a golden light. I prepared a beautiful dinner of roast lamb, rosemary potatoes, and honey-glazed carrots. I set the table with my grandmother's fine china, the pieces I had kept wrapped in silk for years. I wanted everything to be perfect, not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted them to see exactly what they were about to lose. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp. Terrence, Chantel, and Keisha all walked in with wide smiles and greedy eyes. They spent the first hour walking through the apartment, touching the fabric of my curtains and commenting on the brand of my appliances. They spoke about my home as if it were a catalog they were shopping from. "Mama, you really hit the jackpot with this job," Terrence said, pouring himself a glass of my expensive wine. "I always knew you had it in you." I looked at him and realized that he was lying to himself as much as he was lying to me. He had never believed in me. He had only ever believed in what I could do for him. We sat down to dinner, and for a while, the conversation was pleasant. They talked about the grandchildren and the gossip from the old neighborhood. But as soon as the main course was finished, the atmosphere changed. It was as if a signal had been given. Chantel leaned forward with that sharp, painted smile. "So Hattie Mae, have you thought about our proposal? The contractor is ready to start work on the spa next month, and we just need that initial investment to secure the location." Keisha did not wait for me to answer. "And Mama, the house we found is perfect for Jalen and Maya. It has a big backyard and a great school district. We just need that $30,000 for the down payment. It is a drop in the bucket for someone with your salary, right?" I put down my fork and looked at each of them in turn. The silence in the room became so thick, you could almost hear the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I felt a calm I had never known before. "I have spent 40 years making sure your bellies were full and your backs were covered." I began, my voice steady and low. "I have worked extra jobs, I have given up my own dreams, and I have sat in the shadows so that you could stand in the light. And in return, you have treated me as if I were a piece of old furniture that you only noticed when you needed a place to sit." Terrence started to interrupt, but I held up my hand, and for the first time, he was the one who went silent. "I moved to this city, I took this job, and I built this life without a single word of encouragement from any of you. You did not even know which state I was in until you saw a picture of a nice view on the internet. You do not want a relationship with your mother. You want a relationship with my bank account." Keisha looked down at her plate, her face turning a deep shade of red. Chantel tried to speak, but the look in my eyes stopped her cold. "I am not selling this apartment. I am not giving you $60,000 for a business that will likely fail because you do not have the discipline to run it. And I am not giving you $30,000 for a house when you have not even asked me how my health has been. My answer is no. It is a complete and final no." The room erupted into a chaos of shouting and accusations. Terrence called me selfish. Keisha told me I was a terrible grandmother. Chantel said I was a cold-hearted woman who did not care about her family. I sat there and watched them, and for the first time, their words did not hurt me. I realized that their anger was just a reflection of their own failure to see me as a person. When they finally ran out of breath, I stood up and walked to the door. "The car is waiting downstairs to take you back to the airport. Your flights leave in 2 hours. I hope you have a safe journey back to Savannah." They looked at me with a mixture of shock and pure rage, but they realized that I was not going to budge. They gathered their things and walked out of my home without another word. The silence that followed was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I went out onto the balcony and looked at the city lights. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that had been there since I was a young girl. I was free. I was finally, truly free. A few weeks later, I was sitting in a park with Mr. Clarence, watching a group of children play near a fountain. "How are you feeling, Hattie Mae?" he asked, his eyes crinkling behind his silver glasses. "I feel as if I have finally come home to myself," I replied. "I still hear from my children occasionally, but the conversations are different now. They know that I have boundaries that cannot be crossed. They know that I am no longer a bank or a servant. And slowly, very slowly, they are beginning to learn how to be children who actually care about their mother. Whether they ever fully learn that lesson is up to them. My life is full and vibrant now. I have my work, I have my friends, and I have a peace that surpasses all understanding. I have learned that it is never too late to choose yourself. I have learned that no is a complete sentence, and that setting a boundary is the highest form of self-love. I look at that photograph Bernice took of me on my balcony, and I do not see a forgotten grandmother. I see a woman who stood up for herself and won. And that is a story worth telling. Before I close this story, let me say this. Telling stories like this takes something out of me. And if you found any meaning in it, subscribe to Voices of Emily, so we stay connected for the next one. Then share a comment with your thoughts or your experience. I read everyone because your perspective matters more than you think. And if this story left an imprint on you, tap the like button so it reaches someone who might be walking through their own version of it tonight. I often sit by my window as the evening stars emerge, reflecting on the journey from that drafty kitchen in Savannah to this sanctuary in the sky. It is a strange thing to realize that your children can be the very ones who teach you how to be strong by trying to break you. But I am not broken. I am fortified. A mother's silence is not a sign of weakness. It is the sound of a woman finding her voice. I hope that whoever is listening to these words understands that your worth is not measured by your utility to others. You are enough exactly as you are, and you deserve a life that belongs only to you. Do not wait for permission to be the hero of your own life story. Good night, and may you find the peace you have worked so hard to deserve.